Hello
Hello.
again. For the second time, we just had to.
I got a bit
Check
excited with my microphone levels, and I was clipping all over the place.
Yep, that was interesting. We just look at the screen. It's just like me, about average, and you,
Yeah,
huge.
I'm just that excited.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Excited to get back into this because it's been a bit over a month.
A month and a bit, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know. Just been very busy.
Yeah, we took a break over the busy season here. You, Richard, you were very busy with your moving into your.
I moved and then I
new
did
place.
things, and oh god, it's been a wild ride. But and it hasn't stopped because it's been Christmas time as well. So I'm sure everyone's well aware of their constant Christmas chaos that happens every year this time.
Yeah, it's absolutely crazy, and especially like in the past couple of weeks, it's just been mad. It's been mad for me as well.
Yeah, you done a lot of singing stuff as well.
Yeah, I had a few concerts and things like that, and in between all of the other like work and random Christmas stuff.
Yeah, I actually met with a couple of friends yesterday, catching up, Nat and Greg. And Greg does a lot of Christmas carol things. And he's like, I earned $1,000 this week just on Christmas carols, but my voice is dying. I was like, yeah.
Yeah, that's one thing. One thing I don't miss about the carols. I'm taking it a bit easier than I normally have this year. I'd normally have more gigs, but it's just been too crazy. So, yeah, I'm taking it a bit easy. But all the concerts went well and they're done. So now we can get back into the fun stuff like this.
Yeah. Like Syntone stuff is kind of coming along. We've got some opportunities that we may have in the future. We've been doing various competitions and things like that, which have been very interesting. Yeah, we had a gripe with a competition in Australia called Trop Score, which is done by the APRA/Tropfest. I think the APRA handles it, but it's in the Tropfest name.
So they do it in conjunction. Tropfest, if you're not aware, is a short film festival that's been running for about 25 years now. It's very long running. It runs in Sydney every year. And for about 4 or 5 years now, in conjunction with APRA, they've had a competition called Trop Score, where they basically release a short film that's either been a previous Tropfest film or occasionally they'll pick a different one by whoever. Give it to you as like a blank canvas, you write music to it, and then they pick their favorite.
Favorite evidently. Because there was a bunch of complications. The first one being Tropfest being cancelled, which was a real bummer. But Trop Score was actually still going on, apparently. The APRA was still happy to keep it going.
Although they didn't say straight away, so we kind of saw... So they basically announced like through the media outlets that Tropfest was cancelled.
Well, I bitched on Twitter, and then they actually tweeted me back saying, yeah. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. That's right then.
Which was nice. But
there was also the score changing halfway through because the movie in question had its punchline was basically domestic violence, which of course is bad. But if like, I don't want to sound like a jerk or anything like that, but if you haven't seen Tropfest before, like that's a regular thing. Like these kind of dark, gritty themes are kind of a regular thing. Having one band because you know, it was greatly annoying. But that's not the main bit which annoyed me about this entire competition, because I had a score and I was like, okay, well, I guess I'll just write another score. And the second movie they chose was something called... Actually, I forgot what it was called now. Mirror. It was called Mirror.
Yeah, that's right.
Can't remember the name of the producer or director.
I can't remember her name. It's like an Eastern European kind of name.
But it was a very kind of abstract movie. It was where a black dude was sitting in a theater, and then he was on the ceiling, and then he was watching himself on the screen. Then some white girl showed up, and he was watching the white girl on screen, and she was on the ceiling. And then there was just some kind of infinite cinema. It was really weird, really abstract.
Yeah,
one of those movies.
Very experimental film.
Yeah. So when I saw it, and I'm sure when Stefan saw it as well, it was very much... oh, okay, well, it's abstract, so I'll write some abstract music for it, some kind of avant-garde style thing that would fit the movie. And I might release mine later, considering it didn't win.
Yeah, I'm probably going to do the same. We can't unfortunately put them up with the video to show people, but we can at least put the audio up.
Yeah.
And you can,
which we can do later.
You can see, well, you can find a trailer of the video to get an idea of what it was like. But yeah, I kind of did the same thing. I saw the first. In a way, funnily enough, the kind of extension that came about as a result of the movie changing worked a bit well for me, because I got a bit crazy kind of around the time of the competition normally running. So I was running a bit late to get my entry in with the other films. So when they announced they're changing, I was like, okay, I should have time to do this. So I, picked it up, looked at it, thought the same thing. I was like, all right, it's very kind of experimental, kind of minimal aspects. So I did a very kind of minimalist, kind of avant-garde, soundy, worldly kind of thing.
Yeah. Which is exactly what it should be, because it's that kind of movie. But none of that was what was annoying about it. What was annoying was that the winner of it, but kudos to him first off, because I'm not being jelly kind of asshole, like, oh, I didn't win stuff. But his winning entry was, as I said on Twitter, it was the most conventional music for the most unconventional movie. Because his music was stock standard, like typical film music you'd expect.
Oh yeah, it was.
And it was a lovely piece of music. But my God, did it not fit at all?
No, it was like, I mean, if it was brilliant kind of, I'll kind of say it was brilliant Hollywood scoring, let's say. So it would have fitted in really well with a blockbuster kind of movie with like dazzling visuals and that kind of thing. But for a movie like this, it just, I suppose the big thing for me was, one thing I was being very conscious with when I wrote my entry was making sure that the music that I was making didn't kind of overpower the visuals of the film. And when I listened to that entry, like, there's so much music to process. Maybe as well, it doesn't help that we're coming from like a composer's perspective. So I always, I don't know about you, but I always notice film music more and kind of analyze it and all that stuff. But yeah, it just felt so full on, and it wasn't really kind of, there was this climax building that wasn't really being reflected on the screen. So
it was like you said, like that. I liked that wording. It was very good Hollywood scoring, because that's exactly what it was. It was Hollywood scoring for an indie film, and they don't mix. And that's what I found annoying, like, because if I knew all they wanted was typical, copycat garbage, I would have been okay, well, I'll just do that, and I would have probably done a lot better than I then I assume I did, because I didn't win. So that was fun.
We will just echo, like, well done to him. No, there's no like
hard
feelings personally on us.
No. I'm not against him. Like, his music was great.
Yeah, and to give him his due as well, like he's been runner up or a finalist in Trop Score for like 3 or 4 years. And
no, I have no beef with him. I have beef with the decision making, I guess.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But anyway, I'm going to get all salty if I keep on going.
Yeah, we'll move on quickly. We'll
so we've done a few other, I've done a few other competitions. Anyway, I entered the ADO one with something I wrote in like 3 hours, because I wrote a piece which was really difficult, chord progression wise, really complicated, and then it got to like the final week and I'd gotten stuck, because I actually had to go, oh no, I have to think about this, because my chords were so complicated. And it got to the point where I was like, no, I can't finish this in time. So I restarted something, did a very traditional piece of music, and just submitted that. So we'll see how that goes. But I don't think I've done any other major competitions. Have you seen any others?
No, I haven't seen any others around. I didn't end up entering the 8DO competition.
Well, it was during a busy time.
Yeah.
So.
But I guess well, this might be the perfect time to segue into something else, because I guess that like competitions have been light on at the moment. So kind of what has been taking up more time are all of the other like Christmas things. That
We wanted to talk briefly about all the crazy stuff happening in the sample library world with Christmas coming up, because as with anything, everyone wants you to buy their stuff. So all the shops have all their huge posters and shit, and it's been the same with sample library companies. They've done a lot of buy all our stuff, we're doing this, here's our thing, and we're just wondering if I haven't really spoken much about it, but have you bought anything during the sample sales?
Sample Crimbo. No, not so much yet. I guess what I did, because kind of later this year I had a few things on my list that I needed to fill. So I've kind of been filling up, not necessarily with Christmas promotions, but the last thing I bought was some Woodwind library.
Berlin
Woodwinds.
Yeah. Thumbs up for that.
Yeah. So there have been a few things that have piqued my interest, but I haven't bought anything yet. There have been some interesting things coming through. So what have we been coming through lately?
Well, the ADO have been doing their usual release one thing a month thing.
Oh yeah, that
or one every fortnight, I should say. I don't want to shit on ADO, so I won't go into great detail. But they've released something called Majestica, which is basically one of their VAP libraries just kind of transferred over to the public.
Yeah, reskinned.
Which looked nice, but wasn't really my cup of tea. It was like 60 strings, 40 winds, 40 brass, something like that. Super big, but it's a one-trick pony library, so I wasn't too fussed by it. And I think they're also releasing some kind of new hybrid tools thing, like hybrid symphony or something like that.
So they just announced that the other... Well, last week was it Symphonia or something like that?
I think it's called Hybrid Symphony. Symphony is in like
SYN,
yeah.
Phony, yeah. Which I mean, it sounds interesting. Because it kind of sounds like they've taken their so they've released their 3 volumes of hybrid tools. And it sounds like they're kind of trying to kick it up a notch and really meld that with this kind of scoring orchestra kind of idea. It's kind of really early days. They hadn't given many details, so I'm kind of waiting until I form an opinion on it, until I like hear more from them, see what it's actually going to do.
Yeah,
whether it's just going to be like a hybrid tools thing with kind of an orchestra bent, or whether there'll be more kind of flexibility in it.
Yeah, it's an ADO library, so you can't judge it until they've actually told you about it, because they've released a few demos, and the one thing I hate about one of the things I hate about what ADO does is their demos tend to be so full of other libraries that it's really difficult to tell like whether the actual library they're demoing is any good. And the music's really nice. Like Charles Fallman does I think that's his name.
Yeah.
Does some really solid demos, but I wouldn't call them demos for the libraries he's offering. They're more like big pieces that sound cool rather than that. So the latest one for his symphony thing, I was like, this sounds really cool. No idea whether symphony is actually any good or not, but those voices sound really good. Oh, that's our other library. Never mind. And that's it's something I really dislike about that. And it's exactly what's happened here. They've said like, oh, we're releasing this. This is some of the demos, and I'm like, I'm still at square one. I have no idea what this is.
Yeah.
But
we'll just have to wait and see. Eventually, if they do what they normally do, they will release kind of more specific demo tracks where they kind of don't so much like score a piece, but give a
YouTube videos
run through. But
it.
Yeah, until we see more about that, I'm not really
going to comment.
sure. Yeah,
that's the thing, because they've also announced Century Brass or something like that back in September.
A while ago now, yeah.
And they announced Century Strings a week or so ago. And again, it's something which I'm not going to comment on because I have no idea what it is other than a string library.
And
So,
and it does sound interesting, but they've been very generic about it so far. So basically, all they said are, we want to reinvent the wheel again with what scoring does. We're looking at what's kind of interesting to me is they do sound like they are trying to capture a lot of the things that they don't normally do. So one big, well, I suppose you'd call it a complaint issue we've had with a lot of previous ADO libraries are the sampling itself is fine, and a lot of their kind of sampling engines and little patches that they write in are quite good in terms of like legato and those performance things, but we've always found them, like I've always been a bit annoyed that they've lacked the kind of more extended realm of technique that you get.
They're very well suited for Hollywood scoring, but like when you want to get out of that and do more kind of subtle stuff or more like classical stuff, they're not good for that sort of thing.
Yeah. So
which is a shame.
Yeah, so I will be interested to see whether what they've said about the Century project kind of translates into that, or whether it's going to be like just like a new gen version of kind of the 8DO style. I mean, I have nothing against 8DO playing to their strengths, which they do a lot of the time, and with varying degrees of success depending on which library you do. But I mean, I have 8DO libraries that I use quite a lot. So yeah, we'll see. I suppose I've been a bit more excited about some releases that are coming from other companies.
There's a few which have been quite interesting, like Impact Soundworks, who were very well known for their shreddage guitar, and are still well known for their shreddage guitar. I've started kind of branching out into other areas, and they started this with kind of hybrid stuff and a few other percussive bass things.
So they had Rhapsody.
And then, and then a couple of months ago, they just came in with their brass library, conveniently on the same day as the Native Instruments Soundine collaboration, which probably wasn't the best kind of timing.
Bit awkward, yeah.
But I've heard that's a very good library. But they released literally maybe 2-3 days ago, as of this recording, a orchestral colors library. Which sounds very cool. Like, I don't intend to get it, but it sounds really good, which is quite surprising from a company who's more well known for guitars and such. So they're clearly kind of growing from their lower end tier library.
Yeah.
Well, no, I wouldn't call shreddage lower end. I mean, as in like they're not considered big contenders. When you think of sample libraries, you think the big contenders are like ADO, Spitfire, those sort of people. You don't think of Impact Soundworks, but I think they're getting their way up the ladder, which is good.
Well, it's good. I guess we'll just have to really see. The interesting thing about them choosing a library like that to release that orchestra thing is it's really, like you said, there are some big players in the game, and it's not that I don't believe that they have the ability to be able to produce some cracking libraries there. I suppose the tough thing is, like, when you get into that realm of thing, you look at the big players, Spitfire, Orchestra Tools, ADO, they when they produce these massive libraries, they get like the best studios they can get. They bring in like a ton of session musicians and just pump resource, like beautiful microphones, which are kind of necessary now because that kind of level has been set, that standard. If you want to get that kind of compete in that kind of arena, you really need to be producing like as good as your actual software needs to be, and the actual usability of your library needs to be up there. You also really need to be bringing that kind of sound game to the table. So it'd be interesting to see whether they can actually compete with that, or which way they're actually going to go, whether they play to their kind of other strengths of this kind of not so much replicating a natural sound, but going down that kind of electric path.
So we'll see how they go, but they're one to watch for kind of bigger things, I think, these days. There's a few other ones. I mean, technically not during Christmas time, but Sonic and Eric were kind of pushing their new orchestral minimal grosso. I can't remember what it's called, like Sosin or Soso or something like that.
Yeah.
Which is all very subtle.
Oh, Soto, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Which is very subtle sounds. That sounds nice. Not too fussed by it because the other ones I've got from them I never really use.
Yeah.
I use them to listen to when I want inspiration, but I don't actually use them.
Yeah. I guess for me, like, I don't have too many Sonic and Egg libraries apart from their kind of freebie ones that they pass out at Christmas, which there are a few, by the way. So if you're looking for some good freebies, they've got a few little like percussion bits and pieces that come out. But yeah, back to them. So I suppose I use minimal a bit, but mainly kind of in that kind of sketching phase.
Yeah,
where
when you quickly want
moving
going.
into Cubase, and I want to just kind of pop some textures down. But I generally will come along and kind of, if I do use minimal for that purpose, sometimes I won't, I'll skip that. But if I kind of throw it in there, I'll invariably take it out and put in something more fleshed out. Just because you lose, I mean, they're very good libraries for what they do, but the lack of flexibility is annoying. And when you want to move out of those textures, it's very tough when you're kind of locked into this.
Well, yeah, that's a major issue with all phrase libraries. I think out of all the phrase libraries, those Sonic and Egg ones are probably the most flexible out of them, but that's not really saying much because it's a phrase library.
Yeah.
But they're lovely libraries. I just, I like to listen to them rather than use them.
Oh, for sure.
So I've skipped Soto unless it's ridiculously cheap later down the line.
One that I know that we're both we've both been quite interested in at this stage is the new announcement from Orchestral Tools, which we've mentioned a little bit already. Richard uses the libraries extensively, and I've got a few now as well. Their orchestral series, their Berlin series, is top notch, and they've just announced Metropolis.
Well, they announced Metropolis a couple of weeks ago. It actually came out yesterday.
Yeah.
And it took me ages to download, but I managed to download it and play with it this morning. It's really cool. But when they say it is a loud library, they literally mean that. Like, you play the lightest on your keyboard and it's still like BAM! Which is quite funny when actually scoring, because you're like, okay, I want this quiet. Oh, okay. No, you don't want to be quiet. Let's just use a different library then. But yeah, some really good sounds there. Orchestral Tools are debatably one of the most realistic sounding sample library companies out there. I use Berlin Strings, I use Berlin Woodwings, and both of them are impeccable. And Metropolis has the same quality. It's very lovely sounds. Just don't expect any P's or below for that sort of thing. But they sound really good. Like, they've also recorded a bunch of or a couple of things that are typical. So with the low strings, for example, first off, the amount of strings, it's instead of being the usual, say, 8 cellos, 6 double bass. I think that's the usual thing for kind of a big orchestra. It is 6 cellos and 12 double bass, which is kind of a big shift.
Yeah, it was a big change in proportion from what you normally
get. But they've recorded them normally, but they've also recorded them with the cellos up an octave, which sounds really nice. Yeah. I've already started messing with that because it's just one of the nicest sounding strings I've heard in a long time. And all their brass are typically loud and, in your face. The winds are just bassoons and contrabassoons, just out the wazoo. Lots of, just to accompany the brass. Your percussion is big hits or nothing. They also have a piano, which feels a bit useless if you've already got a piano library, but otherwise it's there. It's meant to be so then you get like triple F, but I found messing with my other libraries versus that one, it's like I can easily get that sound with another piano. So, that one's a kind of, didn't really need that in there. But then they also have the choirs, which I've only played about for literally maybe 10 minutes. But what I found straight away is that impeccable sound, but they've sacrificed usability in favor of ease, I guess. So the Mikados and the staccatos are all different kind of sounds. So it's like sa, ku, ma, ti. but they don't give you the choice to use them. They're just different round robins.
So just randomized more or less. Yeah.
Yeah. You can just randomize them or go in order or anything like that. But there's no kind of interface saying play car here, play T here, play meh there here. It's just like, here's your round robins, reset it here or randomizer or whatever. It's true. They're treated like round robins instead of
like syllables.
Syllables, yeah. Which I'm not too fussed by, but I can easily see it being annoying if I actually want to kind of imitate a kind of a phrase or
like a text or something.
Or a text or something. So they're very much they're lovely sounds, but they're very much in favor of ease of use rather than being able to build stuff out of it. And then you got the guitars and the drum kit, which I haven't played with the drum kit yet. And the guitars sound really cool, but you can't, again, like they've got their distortion and stuff pre-baked in, so it's difficult to change the sound if you wanted to change it. But if you want just a kind of quick chuggy sound from electric guitars, bam, there you go, easy peasy. But I'm mostly impressed with the orchestra. Typical good sounds from orchestral tools.
I guess the interesting thing is it's really like I've been impressed that they've put so much into there. It's a fairly, because they're really, before now they've had like a few other libraries, and then they've been focusing on the Berlin series, which are like we've said many times now, they're fantastic libraries, but they're very much like very in depth and detailed, and that's fairly reflected in the price. Whereas, or like what they've done with Metropolis is they've really given you like everything in a box to use, and like the price is very reasonable for.
Yeah,
for
I
what it
mean
is.
the early bird special is really reasonable. It's that's why I bought it pretty much, because I was like, oh god, this is like $400 Australian dollars cheaper than it would be normally. Why the hell not?
Yeah. So it's kind of I guess that's just one of those things, like when you get that, I think you almost kind of have to expect that you're not going to get a fully functional thing to every degree. But I do applaud them for putting, so like, whereas I think most comparable libraries, you mainly get, like, you definitely get the orchestra, but that's about it. For them to put in like a choir and the piano and like even doing things like electric guitars, it's kind of cool that they've kind of given that whole package and given you like a pretty good product for like we've said, it never really compares to doing it yourself, but it's a good alternative.
It is. It's a very nice library. That is my recommendation for Christmas if you have people who really like sample libraries. Is that one. It's full contact player as well, so you don't need the full version, as many people complain about.
That was a plus,
Yeah, so really good, Anyway, let's move on to the second half of what we wanted to talk about, because this podcast is basically about what we've been doing, the Christmas-based things, and then our soundtracks of the year, because this will be the last one before 2016. We basically just want to go through a couple of soundtracks that we really liked, go through the kind of the year in review, and then decide on our individual soundtracks of the year, or soundtrack, I should say.
Yeah,
a specific one. This year's been very interesting for game music. That's all I have to say, because that's literally the best thing to say.
Well, it's been a very varied year. I suppose like the past couple of years we've really seen like a good mix of big like AAA soundtracks, and then some really good music from smaller indie games.
And with the current, I think they'd call it Indiepocalypse, I think, is the current thing, where there's just so many of them. You're also getting a lot of soundtracks from various places as well.
Yeah.
Some obviously stand out. Some of them are utter garbage. I'm not naming names, but
no, look,
and I've
fact
heard
of
my
life,
fair
people,
share.
like you're gonna have some bad things.
I've heard my fair share of awful things this year, but that's comes with the pseudo job.
Yeah,
there's some great stuff, like both, as you said, with AAA and with indie. So Yeah.
Yeah,
sure.
well, we'll get into the nominations in a second, but I suppose we should have a little catch up gaming wise. We've been chewing up a lot of time not talking about games. So, what have you been playing recently since we last?
I've started
together.
playing stuff again.
Yeah.
Well, because of how busy we were the past couple months, I just stopped playing. I didn't start playing Fallout until like 2-3 weeks after it actually came out. Which, by the way, I'm playing Fallout. That's my answer to your question. Yeah, and that's good fun. Like, what have I been doing? Fallout's obviously one of them. I've started playing. I keep playing Binding of Isaac. I can't stop playing that. I bought Endless Legend during the Thanksgiving sales and started playing that. That's pretty fun. It's basically kind of Civilization except fantasy, and much more orientated towards quests.
Okay,
So you've actually got it gives you stuff to do whilst you're kind of building your empire at the same time.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it's a good game, and it has a pretty decent soundtrack too. I've been playing a bit of Armello recently, which is the Sydney kind of furry Game of Thrones game, which I actually really enjoy. It's basically turn-based, kind of move your person across the board, beat shit up, earn your gold, use magic, blah, 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 kill the king, Game of Thrones.
Standard fare, yeah.
But with bunnies. What else have I been playing? I've been playing the typical Nintendo stuff. I did a bit of Splatoon recently. I realized I am really rusty at it. Everyone else is really good at it. Fast Racing Neo came out, and I've been playing that a lot. That's really good. I like straight up from the get-go, the moment it went 3, 2, 1, I pressed A, I was immediately impressed. So that's definitely a really good game to play. Not sure what else really. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it for me the past couple of months. So, yeah, how about you?
Yeah, well, I've been similarly busy, but I've managed to finish a bit of gaming as well myself. I was straight on to Fallout 4 when it came out, or maybe like a day or two afterwards. So I played that for a while. I won't go into detail here because we want to leave time to talk about the music, but I've kind of like gone off Fallout a bit now. So I've been playing a ton of Binding of Isaac as well. I don't think
addicting.
I don't think I'll ever be able to stop playing that game.
No.
And I've been playing I've been loading up a few kind of older things on my pile of shame in Steam that I've been trying to get through. So I can't think of names at the moment. Like bits and pieces here with like Company of Heroes 2 and like a few other games. But it's been a bit slow, but holiday season is coming up, so there'll be time to get stuck into some more games again.
Yeah, that's it. One more I remember. I haven't been playing it recently, but my brother has been playing Dark Souls a lot. I'm a huge fan of Dark Souls, by the way. Absolutely ultra fan. If I could afford the fancy version of Dark Souls 3, I would have got it, but it was $800, so 800 Australian dollars, I'll add, in case any US folk are being like, what the hell?
Yeah.
But if I could afford that, I would totally get that. Because I'm that big of a fan of Dark Souls. But my brother's been playing a lot of Dark Souls. He's been doing crazy runs. So he went through the usual ones because he did Dexterity run when he started. He did a Pyro run recently. But the one he was doing most recently was going through with nothing but arrows.
Oh, wow.
And it's really funny to watch because he basically just he has like 1,000 arrows and he's just firing and dodging. Yeah, it's really strange to watch because you're used to people like whipping up their shields and whacking with big swords, and he's just like rolling around with his bow and arrow. And I'm just saying, this isn't how you play it. And he's just like, yeah, watch me. I'm just like, oh, okay, fair enough. So that's been a delight whenever I go around to my parents' house and to catch up with my brother. So that's a good one. That'll, in fact, actually a brief potential spoiler for the future. I can guarantee Dark Souls 3 will be my soundtrack of the year 2016. Just letting that out there.
Sorry to ruin that for you people, but you heard it here first.
Yeah. Next year, I've already outed my soundtrack of the year. Unless something else completely decimates it, like Dark Souls 3 soundtrack. Bam. I've only heard like one track from it, and I'm like, straight up winner.
Well, you never know. Like, at least you'll either like be not disappointed with your decision, or you'll be so pleasantly surprised for something else that
Yeah, that's true.
it's not really a bad thing anyway.
Yeah, that's true. But yeah, like we've played a lot, but God, have we listened to a lot as well.
Oh yeah.
I there are so many games which I haven't actually played ever, and I've still listened to the soundtracks dozens of times.
I guess we've been so spoiled for releases this year that there's been a lot of stuff that I haven't wanted to miss the soundtracks to, but we just haven't been able to invest the time in playing, which kind of works out well being like a music head with all this stuff, because now that you can just get the soundtracks to everything, I can like listen to them at work and I don't have to play the game. And experience is wonderful music.
There'd be some arguing with that. I mean, one of the solid soundtracks that came out in the past month was the Undertale one.
Yeah.
I wasn't too fussed by Undertale. I know a lot of people love it. But I enjoyed it, but I wasn't like, this is revolutionary like most people are saying. But I like the soundtrack. But I can guarantee there'll be a lot of people which say if you've listened to the soundtrack and haven't played the game, you deserve a punch in the face or something like that. I don't know. I've seen some pretty rowdy people in that fandom.
Well, a lot of people say things. So.
Yeah. But anyway, we've listened to a lot of soundtracks that we haven't even played the games for, which is funny because if we move on to our actual nominations, we've decided on 3 each, and then we're going to choose 1 each as our
soundtrack
of the year. Yeah, how exciting! And out of my 3, 2 of them I haven't actually played, but their soundtracks are so good that I just really think that they're the soundtracks of the year. So I'll go first with my first one, and that's Bloodborne, which I've so wanted to play, but I don't have a PS4 because it's like I said, I'm a huge Dark Souls fan. So anything that's remotely Dark Soulsy, I'm like, oh yeah. And this was essentially a horror kind of Cthulhu. Lovecraftian style version of Dark Souls, but it then grew into its own thing and became debatably the first game worthy of the next generation console purchase, because a lot of people were like, I don't need GTA 5 on PS4, I can get it on PS3 and all that stuff. I think this was the first exclusive to new generations that was worthy of going, you've got to get a new PS4. Basically. But yeah, game-wise, it was excellent. Soundtrack-wise, it was, for me, almost perfect. Because I'm a sucker for kind of really dark, dissonant-sounding music, and this one was just out the buttload of really dark orchestrations. Everything was recorded properly. Even the music, Dark Souls is very well known for having a story that it doesn't really tell you about the story. It kind of guides you along, and if you're rewarded through exploration with story. And Bloodborne does the same thing, but it's also the case with the music as well, because they have a lot of choir in it, and the choir is actually singing in Latin a lot. And if you translate the Latin, it actually kind of spoils some of the story. It talks about stuff like, I think the piece for Cleric Beast, which is one of the first bosses you encounter, they're singing something like, we're trapped in a spider web of blood, and we carve our way through and kill all that we see, something like that in Latin. And you're like, that's actually quite interesting, because you're playing as a hunter which goes around slaying the beasts that aren't meant to be. And it's the same thing with a bunch of other pieces, like when you reach a specific church in the game, at a specific point, it starts having this very dissonant choir piece, which has a soloist, I think that he's a bass, singing like some kind of, I can't remember what the lyrics are now, and then like the rest of the choir repeats it, but just in a big kind of chord fashion. And that, I can't remember it off the top of my head now, but that also has meaning in the game. It's not just like nonsense words to make it sound cool. It's actually about what's happening there. And that's one of the things I love about it, besides the excellent orchestration and music, that it also really fits in with the world, because it's about the world, So I'm very much Bloodborne as my first choice out of the 3.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, aside from, I mean, the immediate thing that that is always kind of brought out with the Dark Souls games, and then now Bloodborne, which is very much in that vein, is obviously the gameplay, because they're notoriously difficult games, and that whole side comes into it. But one thing that I've always been impressed with all of the games right through, so from the first Dark Souls right through to Bloodborne, is how much detail there is in that actual world. Because it'd be very easy to kind of rely on the game. The gameplay mechanics are fantastic, but it'd be very easy to rely on them to kind of prop up the game and kind of neglect other things. And I think, like you said, Bloodborne having the advantage of the next gen consoles and the raw power of the PS4. Generally, the kind of detail in the world is very impressive, even just as you're moving through the various locations. Visually, it's a stunning game, and as well as all the points you've already raised with the music, I think it's it fits into the game so wonderfully, and it's nice to have like we call it an evil soundtrack, but a thoroughly kind of like dark soundtrack that is just
it just fits the
executed
world
so well.
Yeah. And the good thing is that the DLC came out, or the only DLC that's meant to be coming out, came out a couple of weeks ago, and the music for that fits perfectly as well. Like they haven't let up, which is great. So that brilliant soundtrack, love it. Let's move on to your first nomination.
Well, my first nomination is kind of for a similar reason. My first game that I've picked is Mad Max. And I'm just going to, for a second, take off the Australian hat for a second, because I think Mad Max is something that we always kind of, like, Australians are always kind of like, the
Aussie thing,
But I was quite interested to get the game when it came out, because obviously the latest film, Fury Road, came out earlier this year. I was fairly familiar with the old Mad Max before that, but there's very much... George Miller has very much created a kind of a very detailed and wonderful world with his films. And I was interested to see how this Mad Max game would fit into that, particularly with what he did with the latest film and how that would all fit in. And well, firstly, I really enjoyed the game. I know it kind of has mixed opinions from a lot of people, depending on what they like. But I felt that in terms of the soundtrack, it was very much worthy of a nomination, just because of the way that it's been executed into the game. So it's, it's not necessarily like kind of technically the most brilliant soundtrack that you'll hear this year, or you'll have heard. But to me, like a big thing for me with kind of soundtrack scoring is, as I've said many times before in previous podcasts and things, is how well it fits into the game. And for me, like it really captured the kind of desolation and emptiness that they were trying to get through with the game, which for me is particular. Like, it's not that I haven't thought that a lot of other soundtracks haven't been impressive this year, but for me, what's really impressive about the Mad Max soundtrack is that, like, emptiness is something that's inherently difficult to get across with music, because, by its very nature, music is the act of kind of filling silence with noise. So, you kind of, but the kind of inherent paradox with it is, if you just go, right, well, if we want to represent emptiness, we won't have any music in there. That doesn't really work either. So, when I actually played through the game, I was very impressed with how there was just enough kind of music in there to really bring the whatever, the story, the nuances of the game out into the world. And like, the music is great. I've listened to the soundtrack as well, kind of separately, and really enjoyed it. But yeah, for me, it was like, it was one of the kind of high points of that game was really the kind of and the sound design in general of that game is quite brilliant as well. But yeah, for me, that was kind of one of my favorite experiences this year.
Yeah, like I loved the sound design of Mad Max. Like the car noises were very well recorded. And I agree with the soundtrack. Like it wasn't something that I'm going to be humming for years to come or anything like that. And to be honest, I don't actually remember most of it, but that was a good thing because it's a game that you're not meant to be like, oh, this music's epic. It's more like it just works with the world instead of kind of being its own thing. That was a piece of advice that I think who was it? Might have been Danny Elfman gave ages ago, saying like I think the story goes that he wrote music for something. It was some kind of show or movie, and when it was played on its own without the movie, it was kind of boring. And the director was like, well, "Why have you written this music? You know, it's boring." And he's like, "No, it works perfectly with the soundtrack." It doesn't have to sound good on its own as long as it functions and works perfectly with the actual media it's working with. Then it's fine. I'm probably doing the opposite of paraphrasing there because when I read that, it was one sentence as opposed to my paragraph just there.
Yeah.
But the same thing, applies here. Like the music doesn't have to be memorable. It doesn't have to be like in your face or anything like that. As long as it seamlessly works with the world that's been created, then it's a very good soundtrack. And I agree in that regard. Like Mad Max was a good soundtrack.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point to make because I think that's what a lot of people forget as well. Because like I suppose in nowadays, like soundtracks and kind of the composers and the music are more prominent than they were. Like if you obviously video games are a new medium, but if you take it right back to kind of Hollywood. Back in the day when there were a lot of movies being churned out, like that was exactly the point of the music. It wasn't to create wonderful music, even though a lot of it was brilliant music. Like the point of it was to serve the screen. And I think nowadays, like a lot of people, whether the soundtrack works or not, a lot of people are kind of obsessed with kind of creating beautiful music.
Yeah.
Which is like, music doesn't necessarily have to be memorable and musical to be beautiful music, and that's kind of. I
should have mentioned that when we were talking about the chop score thing because that's exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah,
like it's good music, but it don't work with its thing. And Mad Max the opposite. Like it's pretty good music, but it works really well with what it has.
Yeah.
So Mad Max is a good choice for your first nomination. It's good. Anyway, my second nomination is also the second game that I haven't actually played yet, or before, or might not even play at all. But this I've listened to the soundtrack countless times, and my second nomination is actually "Everybody's Gone to the Rapture" by Jennifer Curry, or is it Jessica Curry? I got this wrong last time, and I don't want to get it wrong this time. I'm pretty sure it's Just look it up for me.
Just look it up.
Go on. Jay Curry. She wrote like a very beautiful soundtrack, a very English pastoral type thing, which works very well because the story of Everybody's Gone to the Rapture is like it's some quaint English town where some kind of weird alien happening occurs, and it goes through the stories of the people there as this thing happens, which is effectively the rapture. So the music for it is very English. As one might guess from an quaint English town. But it takes ideas from, God, I can't remember the name of the composers now. What's the name of the typical English guy? Like Taverner? Is that him? The main English pastoral? No, it's not really Taverner. I mean, it has some influence on it. God, I can't remember now. But there's a bunch of English composers from the 20th century that have made very English music, and Everybody's Gone to the Rapture really encompasses that, along with what was her name? You just looked
Jessica
it up.
Curry.
Jessica Curry. Okay, along with her own kind of interesting, unique style, because there's a lot of kind of sailing winds along with that English sound, and there's also kind of what's the word? God, I can't remember any of my music words today. Should have done this on a day which I'm actually awake. What's the name of the type of music that's just voice and piano? Like song cycle or
Like art song kind
art
of thing.
song? Yeah, she just has a couple of art song type pieces in there, which are like a vocal female and a piano, or it starts off like that. Like I think the Morning Tree is one of the main examples of that, which it just grows into a big orchestra doing it at the same time, and that's fantastic sound. So yeah, like everybody's gone to the Rapture. I'm putting down as my second one because it's just brilliantly written music. Nothing else to it.
Yeah, and it's. I think the thing that I love. I mean, I love that music as well. It's a beautiful soundtrack, and it's kind of one of the better examples of music that I've heard in a while. Like game or otherwise, it's brilliantly written music. I'm very jealous of it.
Yeah.
But
like, damn, I should have written that.
Yeah, I guess like. It's such a the other thing about it is it's such a like it's really it's a game where the sound it has to be a very brave soundtrack because there's so much. I mean, it's it's kind of in the style of that was the old Gone Home or whatever the
Gone Home was the walking simulator one. So
and I mean there's a bit more to this game than there was to that, but like it's very much in that style of game where. It's not really a gameplay game. It's a
you're
it's
being
a story game. It's like
you're being handheld and pulled through a story rather.
Than, So there's so much more that the music has to do, and I think like firstly I think it's it's a masterful decision. It's funny because I was thinking about this the other day with a different score that I've heard recently. Like. There's so few scores now where you don't have that kind of modern influence in the music. Even if it's like, even with a lot of scores that are very much like orchestral, inevitably you'll hear in them somewhere like some kind of modern sound design or suites and things.
It's a good point actually, because was Shadow of Mordor this year or last year?
Last year.
Yeah, I think it was, but that's a good example because that was a very big orchestral Lord of the Rings type thing, and then it just has synths in the middle of it. I'm like, what?
Well, yeah. Well, without, I don't want to derail the topic too much, but what really prompted it to me was, as we record this, like we're in the premiere weekend of Star Wars: The Force Awakens, and I'm deliberately not going to say too much to not derail our podcast, but I listened to the soundtrack before going to see the film. I went to see the film last night. And one thing that I was quite, I mean, it's a brilliant soundtrack and strictly not games related, but listen to it because John Williams is a master. But one thing that really stuck to me was it was the score. Like I've listened to even the brilliant film scores I've listened to lately, they're all very modern scores, whereas Williams is just written with an orchestra. He hasn't put anything modern in it, but it's still a fresh new score. And everybody's gone to the Rapture. The score isn't it isn't in the same mold as that, but like I do love that kind of feeling of, I don't know whether you call it like a feeling of nostalgia or something like that.
Traditional,
traditional is the right word. And it's so refreshing to hear that, particularly in a video game, because I suppose games are much more susceptible to that than films can be.
Yeah, because games tend to, besides the AAA stuff, their budget doesn't call for kind of the traditional orchestral sound unless you've got sample library. So a lot of composers have to make do. And so making do can sometimes just be like slap a synth on it and things like that. They don't have the luxury of saying, okay, well, I'll just orchestrate something instead, So,
yeah.
But yeah, so that's my second nomination. So let's move on to your second.
My second nomination is probably not a surprise. Maybe not necessarily for the soundtrack, but definitely everyone's talking about this game. Fallout 4. So I was a big fan of the Fallout 3 game and soundtrack as well. So I guess for me, like what I really enjoyed about the soundtrack for Fallout 4 was the fact that they kind of stepped it up a notch from Fallout 3. Like, they've done that generally with the game. I know there have been, like, again, it's one of those games where people will intensely argue about whether it's like a brilliant new game or kind of a rehashed 3 with some extra things. But one thing that I enjoyed on all accounts was kind of the fact that it was much more full and fleshed out, and I felt that with the soundtrack as well. And Inon Zur has written great music for both, but one thing I felt really kind of came through with Fallout 4 soundtrack was that although there's, you spend a lot of your game going through the wastelands, and there's the kind of requisite and needed kind of ambient world music. But one thing that was really great for me is how anytime the kind of tension ratchets up in the game, the music is right there with it. And inevitably after a while in Fallout 3, I'd kind of start tuning to Galaxy News Radio or whatever and like bopping along to tunes. But I've kind of, I've put like 30, 40 hours or something into Fallout 4 so far, and I'm still not sick of the soundtrack. And I that sounds a bit more negative than it should. I don't really mean being sick of the soundtrack, but like, even though I've heard it all and it's like kind of the same music underneath, it just like, it feels so right. And I love how he just kind of keeps the music simmering underneath while you're in the middle of a battle, and then swells out. It's something that I particularly noticed with. It's kind of very much in the vein of how the music felt in a game like BioShock Infinite. But I think the style of music is really cool, how it builds this swell and kind of gives you the relief in the music as well. Because the game is so fluid moving between kind of combat and exploring and all these things. I think it's a wonderfully fluid soundtrack for what it is.
Yeah, I really liked the Fallout 4 soundtrack because it was clear that Islandser actually put effort into it.
Yeah.
Like, he could have easily just done a rehash of the Fallout 3 soundtrack and be done with it, but he very distinctly made it Boston. Like, you have kind of muted trumpets here and there. There's an accordion when you get I think there's an accordion in the Diamond City music, and I think there's one when you get closer to the I can't remember the name of the ship.
The Endeavour.
Yeah. When you get close to that, like, there's an accordion-based song in there. So he actually put a lot of effort into making it distinctly Commonwealth, rather than just another Fallout soundtrack. And so I really enjoyed it based on that. That's. I'm sure we could talk for ages about that soundtrack, but we'll keep moving.
We'll move on.
Otherwise, we won't. My third and final nomination is actually Splatoon. Because it was delightfully different. Because as you may have guessed on my other two nominations, I'm very big orchestral, kind of big music fan. So when you come to something like, especially the most recent Nintendo stuff, you see it's much more settled down, more not dumbed down. Dumbed down makes it sound negative, but as in, instead of being big sweeping stuff, it's just like 3 instruments or and like that. And that's sometimes just something they have to do. I mean, if it's a game out on the 3DS, they have to use small instrumentation because the speakers are garbage. So when people are listening to it through speakers, a big orchestral sound won't work. You need to use small things. In fact, I think there was an interview with the composers for Triforce Heroes, and because their music is like accordions and violins playing Zelda music. And I was like, well, why have you done that? Zelda music is very orchestral. He's like, well, 3DS speakers are rubbish. We need to make music that works with those speakers, and less instrumentation works that way. But it's also the case with some of their other stuff, like Mario Maker and my nomination of Splatoon, where instead of like big things, they've done something different, something just more silly, I guess. Because with Splatoon, instead of going for a big soundtrack, they've actually based the soundtrack on characters in the game. So you when you're doing through the main story, you hear stories about like this specific band, and you'll find out that that band actually was playing the music, or the tracks that play during the matches. You know, it's very much all guitar, drums, lots of snare on every beat, and it actually works really well because not only does it fit, but also drives you into the world more because you hear this music and it's like, oh, this is cool, and then you find out it was done done inverted commas by the Squid Sisters, Callie and Murray, and you're like, oh, okay, they're those people right there. And then with the constant free DLC that's been coming out, they have some other bands that have started showing up, and they're very different to what the other music is. And in some ways, people will be like, "Oh no," because doesn't sound like Splatoon. But it works because it's not like they've just thrown a piece together and gone, "Okay, here it goes." They've thrown a piece together and worked it into the world as well as making it work with the game. And that's why my third nomination is Splatoon, because they've actually integrated it very well into the world as well as it being good.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting, quite a few points you touched on there are really where like Nintendo's strength lies with their games. I suppose they have the benefit of having been around a long time, and in previous podcasts, we've talked with certain games and like with the long-running series how the music has evolved over time. But I think Nintendo as well, because they produce so much material in-house and they have their stock of in-house composers that has been updated with time. But they kind of come through. So as old ones drop off, new ones come in, but they have that continuity of kind of experience going through. And I think it's really where like games like this really show where that experience comes in handy. You've already spoken about even just kind of hardware considerations and composing for tinny speakers. That's the kind of thing that I think a lot of people would kind of not really have the knowledge and the wisdom to kind of make. And, even for games like this, it can be a thing that can ruin them very easily if it's brilliantly written music, but it just can't be conveyed to the player. I completely agree with how well the soundtrack fits in with the game world. Like, it's kind of interesting and funny to look at Splatoon because it's so... I'm just always impressed at how Nintendo were able to kind of take the first-person shooter and you look at kind of the big names out there, like you have like your Call of Battlefront there, and but there's like there's all these kind of so many shooters out there that can be kind of very samey and generic and realistic, and they've really kind of distilled the core idea out of that and really made their own game with it that's distinctly their kind of flavor. And it's so interesting how the soundtrack isn't stereotypically Nintendo, but at the same time it's something that I can only really kind of hear them doing.
Yeah, so that's why that's my nomination. So let's give you your third, and then we'll...
Yep. So my third nomination is a game that I haven't played yet. Maybe, hopefully, I will eventually, because I would love to. But it is Assassin's Creed Syndicate. Now, I've been kind of a long-time player of the Assassin's Creed games. I have skipped a few in the series. Some of them because of bad reviews, some of them because I just haven't gotten around to them. But I was quite interested to hear... whenever it was announced, well, no, not that long ago, I suppose, but that Austin Wintory had done the music for Syndicate, because Jesper Kidd's been a long time writer for that series, and I'm a fan of his stuff, and I've really enjoyed previous Assassin's Creed soundtracks. They've been like some of my favorite soundtracks to games at that time. So like listening to... Well, before I'd listened to the soundtrack, I was quite interested because I couldn't quite in my head reconcile how... Like, I'm a massive fan of Austin Wintory, but I wasn't sure how that was kind of going to translate to games where, you know, Jesper Kid had been writing for so long and kind of really put his stamp on the games. Like, he's very much written in his like ambient kind of style, and that came through, and that worked very well for the games that he wrote for. So I was really kind of pleasantly surprised when I listened to the soundtrack and heard what Austin had come up with. It's kind of funny. There's kind of a parallel with Everybody's Gone to the Rapture, not so much in the music itself, but with the kind of idea of Englishness, to coin a very horrendous clunky word, or Britishness, because obviously the game is set in London in the whenever century, like 18th century or whenever, like industrial London, and one thing that I really love about the soundtrack is he's managed to bring that kind of folk feeling into the music. So more generally in kind of the way that he's written melodies, there's these real kind of really jaunty jig or reel style kind of string writing with so there's like a cello and some other higher instruments like violin, I think, as well, he uses at times, and they either play in duet or do other things, and they're just really delightful things. But one of the standouts, I think, are is quite a departure from what they've done before in the series, but they introduced these kind of murder ballads in this game. So, like, if you're not overly aware with Assassin's Creed and how it works, basically you play as an assassin. Big surprise. Yeah. But more often than not, as like a substantial part of the gameplay, you, for whatever reasons, have to assassinate certain people, and like you get filled in on the backstory and things like that. And normally in previous games, the ones that I've played, they kind of a lot of that is kind of conveyed in dialogue and in story, and then the music kind of sits in the background. But what they did with this one, he actually collaborated with Tripod, who are an Australian comedy music group based in Melbourne. He's worked with them on a couple of things before. But they actually wrote these murder ballads, which are these kind of... They've turned the story of these people into these kind of folk tune, song, ballad kind of things. Yeah. And they're just delightful. Like the Tripod guys are brilliant writers, and in this collaboration, they've managed to come up with something that's very kind of cool and fits really well and is quite unique. So I really enjoyed that. But yeah, it's I kind of earned my nomination because it's it's a very kind of bold soundtrack, and it did a lot of things that I kind of haven't really come across before. And I always enjoy that with Austin Wintory's soundtracks. He always kind of finds a way to bring something fresh to the music that he does.
Cool. I'll admit I'm behind and haven't really listened to it extensively yet. But from what I heard, it was really good. So, that's a very worthy nomination. So, there's our 6 in total, 3 and 3. What would you say would be your number 1 out of those 3?
Oh, I'm actually going to have to go with Assassin's Creed. Okay. I think, like, to be fair, for me to kind of pick a winner, as much as I very much like to think about games in context, I think that's the one that really kind of stands out as a soundtrack in itself. While we've already said how the other two are brilliant soundtracks, I think the Assassin's Creed soundtrack still manages to accomplish that within the game and be music that I would like, that I very happily listen to outside of the game, and that always kind of impresses me as well.
Yeah, okay, cool. All right, so Assassin's Creed is yours. Mine is Bloodborne, straight up. Just because it worked so perfectly with the world. I'm a huge fan of that kind of music in the first place. It's impeccably well done, orchestrated wise, performance wise, scenario wise. It's just overall a fantastic soundtrack for a supposedly fantastic game. So Bloodborne is absolutely my soundtrack of the year, definitely.
Cool.
Yeah.
Here's the interesting question. Which of my three would you pick as the?
Oh
as
yeah,
the winner?
okay. I'd probably go with Fallout, just because Assassin's Creed I haven't really listened to much.
Fair enough, yeah.
And out of Mad Max and Fallout's a better one. What about my three then?
I'd probably actually go with Everybody's Gone to the Rapture. Again, I won't repeat anything that we said before, but that's probably one that I would have put on my top three if things worked out differently and it wasn't on yours. That's probably my one that would have been in there. So
Cool. Yeah, so there's your two, Bloodborne and Assassin's Creed. Excellent. Let's hope that 2016 has just as good a year for music.
Yeah, well, there are a lot of interesting games scheduled to be released throughout the year, and there'll be some big names. So,
yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what we get along the way.
Yeah, Dark Souls 3. It's just for me. That's it. I'm all done. Okay, cool. Right. Well, we have plenty of ideas to do. We'll see if we can implement them throughout the year. And hope you are happy we're back and enjoy what we hopefully will bring out soon.
Yeah, and Merry Christmas.
Oh, that too. Happy holidays for
Happy
the
holidays, and
inclined.
we'll be back soon with more things.
All right, cool. See ya.
See ya.